Thank you, and hello everybody who's joining us today for the presentation of our new solar permit application process. My name is Lila Piggott. I am in the technology team at the Bureau of Development Services, and I will be facilitating the presentation today. And I am joined by Lee Wheeler, who will be giving us our technical demonstration. As a reminder, we are recording this presentation, and we're going to jump right into the agenda. Here's our agenda. We'll provide a quick overview of why we are gathered here today and what has brought us to this point. We will dig into some of the specific improvements that we have made to the DevHub solar permit application process. We will go over what the purpose of our gathering time is today, and we will then give a technical demo, make sure you have clarity around what our updated application requirements are, also have clarity around what sort of support you can get and how to get it, and then let you know what our next steps are. So first, just a high-level overview. I'm going to do that thing where you read a little bit of the slide. So this is there has been a citywide effort to prioritize work that makes a positive impact on climate change. And the Bureau of Development Services has been focusing on improving their solar permit process in collaboration with our solar permit customers. There have been a lot of updates over the past year, and the purpose and focus of today's presentation is to walk you through the improvements we've made to the application submission process. The changes that you're going to see today are in response to feedback that we've received from our customers through a variety of methods, including some meetings that happened late last year and ongoing conversations throughout this year. And the focus is going to be on producing a more simplified automated process. So you're going to see what that looks like in action today. We will continue to partner with our solar customers with a focus on continuous improvement. So the work that we're going to show you today is not the end of the work that we're doing. It is just one step in many that have been taken and will be taken to continue to improve this process. So I quickly want to share that these are the categories we're going to focus on. I'm going to talk to you about how the changes we've made in the DevHub solar permit process will show up as improvements in these categories. We've enhanced the layout. It will look a lot different from what you're currently used to. We've put the application process in more of a Q&A approach or Q&A format. And another focus of this effort has been on efficiency, creating and identifying areas where there may have been bottlenecks or things got hung up regularly, and ensuring that we have put processes in place that ideally will eliminate those bottlenecks. So first, enhanced layout. This is going to look a lot different, as I mentioned before. You're going to see a more modern application interface and navigation, likely what you're more used to maybe in other online application experiences you've had. We did ensure that this update is mobile responsive, which means that it will resize and sort of reorient itself based on whether you're accessing it through a cell phone or an iPad or some sort of other touch style device. You'll see throughout the application that we've built in support along the way, and that support is tied to specific areas where it is common for people to have questions. And you'll see that sometimes it pops up, sometimes it's just there, sometimes it's available on a drop-down, sometimes it gives you a link to click through. So you're going to see a lot of support built into the process. The Q&A approach, what you're going to see is this is more of a wizard style format or something similar to an experience you might have in a survey tool. So we've built in the questions, specifically pulling those out of the current solar checklist document into this wizard style format. Excuse me. And it will only ask for questions that are relevant to your project. So we've built it in a way that as you progress through the application, questions are asked, and based on your response, you will or will not receive additional questions. So you'll see that in more detail. We will show you examples of that today. The other change is that this Q&A approach also positions us to tell you as the applicant along the way whether or not your project qualifies for prescriptive or not. So in the previous iteration, in the checklist you're using now, it's more of a PDF document and you fill it all out. In the way that this is set up is as you answer questions, you'll actually be informed through some automation we've built into the system that you can continue along the path to move forward with a prescriptive application, or actually based on what you've told us, your project would need to be engineered, and that path has different requirements. And as I mentioned before in the previous slide, we've built a lot of support into this Q&A style format. Again, the support is dependent upon how you answer the questions. And the final sort of third area that we focused on is efficiency. So because we've built this document out, or this experience out, in more of a Q&A, question and answer style format, we have built a lot of the fields and questions that we have into the automated process. So you will not need to upload documents. Instead, you'll be answering those questions online instead of having to fill out a paper PDF style document and then upload that document. We'll speak to that in more specifics later, and we have provided you in this presentation a list of what has changed, but in particular, you will no longer need to submit the checklist and requirements document, and you will no longer need to submit the building application, the building permit application. All of those questions, all of the details that we need out of those documents are built into the DevHub interface, and you'll answer questions and fill out fields along the way that will give us the same kind of data that, or information that we would have needed. I'm making sure I get to all of the bits and pieces. One other nice feature is in some cases, our applicants are not able to find the address for the property that they need to apply for a permit on, and Lee will show you this in the demonstration today. There is now the ability to continue to move forward in the application process, even if your address doesn't show up. We've also made finding your address a lot easier, and you'll see that too. So just to highlight, this demonstration is for you. We would like you to ask questions throughout, but we would like you to do that using the chat feature in Zoom. So type your questions in. We'll be watching for questions, and we'll make every effort to maybe answer those questions in writing, or at the very least answer them on audio. We will ensure that we both read and answer questions so that the answers are included in the recording of this demonstration. We're going to be focused on sharing how the application interface and process have changed, and also answering questions about this updated application submission process. If anything else comes up that is not related to the changes to the application process, we will be sure to capture those questions and find a way to follow up on those questions at a future date. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Lee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Wheeler, and I'm going to go off camera while I share my screen. Okay, so I have just logged into DevHub, and this is the home screen. Something you might want to do every so often is double check your account information to make sure that you have, your contact information right. The email is really important. Unfortunately, on our form right now, you can't upload or update your email yourself. So what you'd want to do is go to the bottom, and on this DevHub feedback, you can get help with updating your email. So that is an option for you to get help with anytime there's something that doesn't seem quite right to you on DevHub, you're having problems with, you can get help that way. So now that we've checked our information and it looks right, I'm going to go back to our home screen. And let's scroll down just a little bit and we'll go ahead and apply for a new permit. And starting on next week, after we get this updated in our production environment, your solar permit request will be up a little higher in the list. It'll be second. Right now, it's just a little lower down the list. So let's click on that and you'll get to see our new look and feel for the solar process. What we've done is try to give you all of the information that you need, but only as you need it. And so if you need more information about your solar permit process paths, then just give the drop down a click and you'll have all of that information available to you. Any of the links will open in a new tab and it'll be outside of your DevHub session. And so you can go right back to where you were and not lose your place. And I'm going to go ahead and close that tab for now. And if you don't need any of the specific information like the historic resource information, zoning, then you can just bypass all of that and continue on with this application. On this page, what I'd like to point out is we have some new buttons. We have Save My Work, which saves all your work up to that point. We have a cancel application, which will cancel the whole thing and take you back to the home page. And if you accidentally click it, it will ask you if you're sure, and you can say yes or no, and either continue here or go ahead and cancel. And the exit button works the same way. It'll take you back to the home page and it will ask you if you're sure. As Lila mentioned, one of the updates is if you know that you have an engineered project and you choose that option, then your next step is to avoid the checklist questions entirely and end up on the application page. And you'd go ahead and choose your address and you continue on with your application and upload your documents. Let's come back to this page once we take a look at our prescriptive process. This page is shared with both the engineered and prescriptive processes. This is where you end up to give information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll to the bottom of the page, and we always have a previous button so that you can go back to the previous screen. So let's continue on with the prescriptive path. One of the new features is that we've provided a progress bar, which lets you know where you are in the application process. And if you notice, Save My Work, Cancel, and Exit are all still here available to you. And this is the information, this is the address search new functionality. If you remember, for the other permit requests, you type in each section of data in different boxes. And what this does is it uses predictive text to pull up options for you from our system. And you can scroll down and have a look at what's available to you. So if I was looking for 2245 Southeast Powell, then I could go ahead and choose that. Now, if you were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's Lila. I'll just interject one thing. So it will look for whatever the address begins with. So in this case, what we just discovered is, and this is surprising, but possible, especially in the test environment, which is where Lee is showing you this, that none of the addresses in our database start with 45. So it will show you the things that start with 45 first. But in this case, it's showing us addresses that contain 45 because none of them start with 45.
And if you click that, then it'll go away and you could start over. So if you were looking at something that starts with 60, you can see that there's several options here that start with 60, and then it starts offering other areas where there might be something else. So let's choose that one. If you were looking at this one and you wanted to say that the project was going to be on the ADU roof, and not on, maybe this is the main house, then you'd probably want to type in over here that it's on the ADU. And we have other instructions, like if you wanted to search by the property ID, that is possible as well. There are instructions up here. You can go to Portland Maps to get that number. And then also, if you've looked and looked and you really can't find an address in here at all, you can type into the square not listed, and that is an option, and you'll be able to type in the address over in your additional job site information box, and that will help the tech make sure that your permit is associated with the correct property. And the way that we've provided these options lets you move forward in the process, get that request in, and start getting that permit set up. So let's use this address, and we'll click next. And you can see that we're done with site address, and now we're on system information. And this, let me just show you how we're providing information related to each question. So let's click yes for a ballasted system, and then we'll click yes for the weight of the modules being less than 4.5 pounds per square foot, and we'll accidentally leave this question blank. So if we click next, it's going to provide a message here that a ballasted system requires the engineered pathway, and that we left this question blank. So if you are using a ballasted system and, oh shoot, we do have to do the engineered pathway, then you can just use this take me to the engineered pathway button and continue on. You don't have to answer any more of the prescriptive checklist questions. You can just move on to the engineered pathway and you're done with those questions. Let's say it is actually not a ballasted system and we just clicked the wrong thing. And we will click yes for the third question there, and we'll move on to the next screen. You can see we're still continuing along our progress bar. And what I'll do is I'll answer these two questions. And here's another area where we're showing only the questions and information that you need for your project. So let's say the project has pre-engineered trusses. If we click on that, we'll get a little note here mentioning that those are uncommon on structures built prior to 1970. And if we continue on, we're going to ask a few questions about pre-engineered trusses. So let's actually go back and let's take a look at roof rafters. If you pick that, that information about trusses is not relevant anymore. It goes away. And so we'll continue on with information about the roof rafters using conventional sawn lumber. If other framing types are used, then it no longer works with the prescriptive pathway, and it lets you know that that doesn't work. So let's go back and choose roof rafters, and we'll continue on with the prescriptive path. Because of the roof rafters, there's this Oregon Residential Specialty Code has some information around that. We've provided it here. If you're familiar and you don't need to look at that, you can just close that. And then also there's a roof cross-section information provided if that's needed. And if you don't need that, you can just pull that up and not look at that during the process. So let's move on to the next screen. Here is some information about hip and valley rafters, and some projects will have that and some projects won't. So if yours doesn't have any of a hip and valley rafter component, then you'd put not applicable, and then you can just move on to the next screen. If you wanted to take a look at this diagram, which refers to figure 3 and figure 5, then those are available to you right down here, but only if you need to look at them. And just use the pull downs, and it's all there available, but not showing in case you need it. So let's move on to the next page. And for the prescriptive path, you need to have the roof rafter size, spacing, grade of wood. So what we've done is instead of this big this table that is a little hard to read, you have to figure it all out. What we've done is embed that all of that information in this in a table to make it automated. So let's say your roof rafter size was 2 by 8 and you took a measurement and it was 16 inches on center. And let's say it's the Doug for large number 2, because that's a super common one for the Portland area. It's automatically going to tell you what your maximum roof rafter span is. And that is directly from this table that you don't have to look at anymore. So we'll go back. There's a couple of options in here that I'd like to just explain really quickly. Maybe it's not clear to someone on the site what grade of wood that that they have. And so if it's not known, then what we're doing is assuming that it's Doug fir and large number 2. And so it's going to use that same maximum roof rafter span for that. Or maybe you took a look in the roof rafters and it's not listed here. Like there was some other options in that table that was provided by the state. We've used the most common ones, but maybe it's something else. You can use other, and it's going to ask to have you upload the table that you're using for that type of wood that you found. So, and it will ask for that at the end. It's going to advise you at this point, and then at the end when we upload documents, then it's going to ask for that information. So let's go ahead and say that it's 15 feet, and we'll go to the next. So here's a couple of questions about structural supports and attachments. And you can see up here that we're moving along through the application process. And we'll click next. And here's another area where we're really only asking questions when it applies to your project. If we're not using, if the project does not have a metal roof, then you can click no and go ahead and move along. But if it is a metal roof, then we have some more questions to ask based on how it's attached to the roof deck and some other questions. So for now, I'm going to click no. We don't have a metal roof, and let's move on to the next stage. So the prescriptive process path, the checklist questions are done, and we'll continue on to the application.
This might be a good time to pause and just see if anybody wants to chat in any questions. We have one from Garrett that is asking, does that only apply when the modules are directly over the hip valley rafters rather than modules on a roof plane? And I'm asking follow-up questions to clarify that part. So we might end up going back to that part of the application, Lee, probably where it was yes, no, not applicable. And then I have another question here from Molly. What if there are multiple rafter spans for the project? Was there an additional rafters option, or if one roof has pre-engineered trusses and rafters? That is a good question. And it might be one that we have to come back to, Molly. We might go back to our technical team on the engineering group and ask that question. Let's see. And then Garrett, if the modular is over. And Garrett, yours is a good and very technical question about what does and doesn't qualify and how that works. That I think both your question and Molly's question will have to go back to some of our reviewer experts so that we can get you answers to those questions and speak to how to navigate that in this new application process. Thank you for your questions.
Okay, so I'll, for now, go ahead and continue with the application process. At the beginning of the prescriptive questions, we picked our address and we entered this information. And it's presented back to you on the application page, just so you can check it, make sure that everything's okay. And one thing to note is that we have, and this is a navigation bar, kind of and process. Like you can tell how far you're coming along a progress bar here. And this one's clickable. So if you want to go straight down to the firefighter access, then you can go ahead and do that. But otherwise you can see how, how much you have to go, save your work if you need to, go to lunch, come back, continue on where you left off. With the applicant information, most of the time, the customer who has logged in is the applicant. And so if we click yes, then we're going to go ahead and attach the information from your account information to this permit request. If you're filling it out for someone else, you can go ahead and add information in here, and that'll be attached to the permit request. So let's just say for now that I am logged in and I am the applicant, and we will continue on to this contact information. This is a new section in our discovery process in doing this project. What we found was the property owner was interested in more transparency, more communication. And so this allows us to provide that to them. And then the designer and technical lead, sometimes our reviewers have questions, and if they could just make a phone call, get to someone who could give them information about this project, then they would be able to move along more quickly. So we're asking to provide someone who can help a reviewer, help an inspector if they just have a quick question. And let's go ahead and fill that in. And we'll do that. And our contractor information is the contractor who's doing the work. Most of the time for our solar projects, we found that contractors are doing the work most of the time. So that's the first option. Occasionally we do get a property owner, but it's much more common to get a contractor. And what we'll do is we'll just fill in our contractor information, and that way we'll have all the information needed for the contractor. For most of the solar projects, it's a residential category of construction. We're getting a few more commercials, but residential is much more common. So we put that at the top of the list. And what you'll want to do is just describe the project. And probably better than I've just done for our demo. You don't need to watch me type for a long time. Our system information, this application is by far used for photovoltaic modules, but we have occasionally had solar water heating collectors. And so we've allowed for that option in case that is something that people have a permit request for. But most of the time it's definitely going to be PV modules. And then we ask for our manufacturer and a model number. This PV module requirement with the electrical renewable energy form, that is a new requirement at submittal. We'll want to have that renewable energy permit application uploaded at the time that you submit the other elements of this permit request. If you don't have the form, you can click on that link, and all the forms related to solar are here, and it is the electrical renewable energy permit application. And I know right now that it is not a fillable form, but what we're doing is making it a fillable form by go live next week. And so that'll be available to you. So you just fill that out, give it a save, and then you can upload it to your, here's my form. You can just upload it to your application. Let's take a look at our firefighter access and escape section. This one also is an example of showing only questions that are related to the specific project. So if it's on a non-occupied accessory structure, then you would click yes, and there aren't any more questions. But if, for example, it's on the main house that's occupied, or if it's on the ADU, and to be occupied, then we do have a few more questions, and there are requirements around pathways to allow the firefighters to do their jobs. So there would be, you just need to answer those questions. And then there's a couple of conditional ones in here based on how, what the project looks like. And once we answer yes, then there's some information about where the pathways need to be. If we answer no, there's a little bit different information. So that's available and targeted at your specific project. So let's look at our documents and plans upload. We have, you can upload the plan set in one PDF. This describes what's needed for each, for your plan set. It does need to be a PDF, and it does have to be 100 megs or smaller. So, and then there's some information available. Once you hover over this, we have a pop-up that reminds you that the only PDFs are accepted, and we'll choose a file. Here's a sample plan set. We'll open that. And this one, remember how we checked that we had a different grade of wood than what was in the list? It's going to ask for information around that. And remember, it's only a PDF, so so you could actually photograph the actual grade stamp on the rafter and paste it into a Word doc, make it a PDF, and just upload that. So let's have a sample here. We'll open that. So we're just about done. We have our acknowledgements at the end. This information is from the building permit application, and that was something that was typically agreed to on the building permit application. This one is from our permit request information, and this may not apply to like all solar projects, but it is upcoming things and deadlines that would apply to many of the permit requests, and is used for all of our permit request language. So we've gotten to this point, and we're going to click submit, and it asks me if I'm sure. So this is my last opportunity to go back and re-upload something, check anything you need to do. I'm going to go ahead and click that I'm ready. And it'll take just a minute to collect all of that information, push it over to our permitting system. And what happens behind the scenes is that it's preparing an email for you, attaching a report that shows all of that information that you've provided in your application process, and it assigns it to the task list, the permitting services task list, so that they can start preparing your permit request and making sure it's complete. So this one, you want to make a note of your permit request number, and I'm kind of checking to make sure. I should get an email here just in a second, and I can show you what that email will look like. What we'll do is click continue, and that will take us back to our home page. Now, if you have trouble with any of the process. If you got, for example, an odd error message, if you weren't able to log in, then you'd want to go to the bottom of the page and click that feedback, DevHub help and feedback. That'll get you a form to send to my team, who is looking at that all the time and can help you out. Otherwise, you'd want to get a 15-minute appointment specific to the area that you're interested in. So if it's something about the permitting process, like how do I submit, what form do I need, that would be the permitting services. There's also options for like the zoning folks can have their own, the fire access people have their own 15-minute appointment. So do look to make sure that you're getting your appointment with the correct group. And then one other thing, if you end up getting, you have gone through the process and someone in inspections has said that you want to get a revision on your permit, what you're going to want to do is apply for a new permit, and you're going to want to go to this building permit request, and you're going to want to, I'm going to have to choose an address. So you'll choose, here's that language again. It talks about upcoming deadlines. I'm just going to pick one just because we're in a demo. And what you'll want to do is on this request type, then you'll want to do a revision on an issued permit. And so that's how you get your revision, is to go back into the existing permit request area and choose revision. And then you'd put that that IVR number that you took a note of, you could put that in there. So that is what you'd want to do for your revisions. And I don't know if there would be a deferred submittal on a solar project, but that is also available to you here. And my email popped up. This is the email that you'll get. Here, let me just go ahead and zoom in just a smidgen on that. The email that you'll get for when you submit your permit request. And here is that report is attached, and that's for your records. And I think I've covered all of the elements. Are there any questions or concerns?
I wanted to answer one question as I'm typing. I can't type and talk at the same time, no matter how much I'd like to. There was one question from Paolo a while ago, and I just wanted to ask Paolo if you have clarity on your question around what uploads are required. So the question, Lee, was, there was an initial question that I answered, which was, do we still need to upload a permit application form and a checklist when it is prescriptive? And I said, no, you do not. And the follow-up question was, so all we need to do moving forward is upload the plan set and the structural calcs. And that was asked right around when you were showing that portion of the application. So, you know, the answer is it depends a little bit, depending upon the wood grade. But so Lee, are you going to navigate back to that section and just run through it again? So that's easy. Okay, great. I think that would be helpful.
So,
yeah.
So, so is the question about the engineered system and what's required to
prescriptive, actually.
For prescriptive,
yeah.
Okay.
And what would be required for upload?
So on that, here, let's just grab.
I know.
It starts and you have to answer the questions. So let me just get those.
So while Lee is doing this part of what's happening is the uploads are dependent upon whether it is prescriptive or engineered, meaning there's system programming in the background, then some logic we've put in there, and that's all very technical. But all that to say, if you travel down the prescriptive path, certain uploads would be required. If you end up determining that you're engineered, or you select that from the very beginning, different uploads will be required. So she's running through the application now as quickly as possible by strategically picking the questions that will allow her to do so.
Yes.
And then we can go through those uploads and just make sure that that was really clear. We also do have a document or a page in this presentation that I'll show in a moment that speaks to this a little bit in terms of what is newly required and what is no longer required. But Paolo, that was a good question, and I think it wouldn't hurt to focus on that area a little bit more. So we'll go take a look at that. Another question while Leah is doing that was from Molly. Will the IVR for intake still be different from the one that ultimately is assigned to the issued permit? And the answer is yes. We are doing some work within the technology team to relabel those numbers eventually, so that that intake IVR will probably be called something else or sort of show up in a different way, because that can be a little confusing for our customers, and we understand why that would be confusing. But for now, yes, you will have a different IVR for the one that is assigned to the issued permit. And then there are a few different questions from Garrett that I'm capturing in my notes that will require follow-up with some of our more, some of the folks on our team who are more familiar with the technical aspects of reviewing solar permits. And so we will follow up on those and then get back to Garrett and probably the group, because it doesn't hurt for everybody to know, with the answers to those questions.
So to go back and make sure I have the scenario set up correctly, did you want to see like the minimal submittals? Like when
Yes.
Okay, so when I picked other before, it said, hey, you need to have something else down here, and there's some options that we would want.
Right.
So if it was straight up like for, oh, come on. And typical thing, my roof rafter span is 10, the maximum allowable is 12. Oh, you know, since we're here, I did have one thing. These measurements are in the table as 12 feet 5 inches, but my this field, because it's in my database, won't take, like, I can't put something in that's like this.
Right. It's going to require
Can't do it. It just won't do it. So I'm gonna, like, if it's 10.5 feet, then I have to put 10.5 here. That's was a limitation that we just couldn't get around. So I'll bring that up now, just so that you're aware of it. And then let's move on to the next. Let's get back to the document area.
Yep.
So we'll say yes to those. And we'll click next. And we're not on a metal roof, so we'll click next. And the checklist is complete. And let's just go straight down to our documents and plans and have a look. So the only thing that's required here is the plan set. And so you'd want your site plan, somewhere indicated your fire access path in your plan set. It looks like the roof framing plan is needed, the cross section, and the system racking attachment. And those don't have to be all like totally separate pages, but I know that sometimes that kind of thing can be combined, but it is only asking for a plan set. And so I would go to the sample plan set and add that in. And does that answer your question?
And does it allow you to upload more than one document in this section?
In this section, it doesn't.
Okay, so that's, yes, that is an answer. So it's asking for a plan set, and then is there anything else that is required? Like, are structural calcs included in that list? I don't think so.
The structural calcs are required for the engineered pathway.
Right, so we don't need structural calcs if it's prescriptive.
Correct.
We tried to make it as easy as possible. Great. Let's see, no data sheet specifications with the plan set. I do believe that those are required, actually, Laura. That is a very good question. I think you're referring to like details from the manufacturer of the solar panels. Yeah. Oh, well, these are excellent questions. We have one person asking if we do need those, and then one person saying we never sent those before. So we will follow up on that question as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that when we asked for this information here, maybe that, yeah, we'll have to check back.
Yep, we can check back on that one.
Subject matter experts and just make sure if that requirement or whatever was covered by that information.
Yep, happy to do that. Okay. Thank you, Lee. Okay, so we covered this in the demo, but we thought it would be helpful to have this information consolidated into one of the slides in our presentation as well. So some items that are newly required at submittal are we do need an email and a phone number for the property owner and also the designer and or technical lead. In some cases, we found that it has been hard to reach that person because we've been working off of the phone number and email address for the applicant, but that isn't always the person who actually can help us answer questions about the design. So we're requiring that information. As Lee mentioned, we are also requiring a electrical renewable energy permit application. This form has already been required in order to complete a solar permit application, but it is not something that was required at submittal. So that is a difference. So for those of you who are applicants, that is an important thing to note. And then what is no longer required is the checklist and submittal requirements for solar installations form, AKA the solar checklist, AKA the checklist. We also no longer need a building permit application. We also, during our work with our subject matter experts, determined that we no longer are going to need a building elevation drawing. And in addition, for those plans with pre-engineered trusses, we no longer need a roof cross-section or a roof framing plan. And that is noted in the application as well in that help text that Lee was actually just showing. Let me see. Oh. Just a little zoom issue. Okay. And I'm gonna move to the next slide. So again, we also mentioned earlier that we thought it would be helpful to consolidate some information for you about how to get support with your application. So there's the solar permits webpage, and we are making updates to that based on the changes to the online application process. There's obviously some changes around requirements. There's some changes around needing a checklist at all. And we have a worksheet that we're going to be providing that can be taken on site to be used in place of a checklist, in case that's helpful, as we are guessing that in some cases, the person who is doing the application itself is not the person who's on site putting together the quote. We also will include some additional more easy to find links on the webpage around how to schedule a 15-minute appointment. And let's see what else. With 15-minute appointments, and Lee mentioned this before, but I would like to reiterate this. With the way 15-minute appointments are laid out on our webpage, the first appointment person in the list is a permit tech. However, it is very, very likely that your questions are questions that need to be answered by someone that has more detailed knowledge of your specific issue. So when you're selecting a 15-minute appointment, make sure you're scheduling with the right kind of person to get your questions answered. This will make your process much more efficient. It's most common that you may be interacting with a city planner. Building code and engineering reviewer is another one that's listed on the 15-minute appointment page. And that is where you would get help with structural requirements, anything related to building code, and also life safety. So there's a variety of review reviewers and review type questions that fall into that building code and engineering reviewer item. And then you can also schedule directly with a fire safety expert around any questions related to fire safety pathways.
Lila,
Yep.
in the chat, there's a question. Paulo has a question. Says the application process looks good. However, most of the problems are encountered during the review. Will there be improvement on your review process? The city of Portland is the hardest city to acquire a building permit. The reviewer will flag an application up to the smallest detail.
Yeah, Paolo, and I think there's also another question from Fabian around the timeline for getting a permit application issued. Those are both questions that we can take offline and get further follow-up on. To go back to Paolo's statement, the idea is that we are taking this initial step to make the submission process more transparent and easy to follow, so we get applications that are more complete and more thorough. But we are continuing to do work with the solar community on improving processes throughout. So there are conversations happening internally and with solar community members around the review process. So this is sort of one, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is sort of one step in some that have been taken up until this point to improve the process. And then there will be further conversation as we move forward in other aspects of the process. Just a quick note that we will be, you're welcome, Paolo, that we will be sending all of the attendees here today and anyone we have in our solar customer email list a copy of this presentation and a link to the recorded demo. We will also make both of those items available on our website for easy access. We also want to let you know that we're making an effort to collect information from our applicants, probably for about the first month after this new functionality goes live. And by live, I mean it becomes available. And it's what you find when you go to DevHub and start an application. That's happening starting the evening of October 12th. So it's most likely you'll see the difference on the morning of October 13th. So what we'll be doing is, as we receive applications starting on the 13th, we will be reaching out probably about once a week to applicants with a brief survey through a product called SurveyMonkey. So it is likely already familiar to you. And it should take about 3 minutes. The responses are anonymous, but we do ask if you'd like us to reach you, you can share your contact information. We'll be collecting that information and then taking it into account as we look forward to making additional improvements to DevHub.
And there is an additional question. Isabel asked, so when we get a check sheet from a reviewer, are we still requesting an upload link via email? And that answer is yes. The corrections process hasn't changed. So far, we have improved the application process, but the corrections process is still the same.
Yes. Any other remaining questions in our last 4 minutes? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for your very good questions. It's always nice to get questions because then we know people care and are paying attention. So it was great to hear from everybody. And we will, as I mentioned, we'll be getting documentation out to everyone. And thanks again for joining us.